Guys, I'm Joan.
And I'm Joanita.
And we are students of Ghana Christian International High School. And we urge you all to subscribe to HisGov TV. Thank you. Bye.
Hello there, you are welcome to HisGov TV. Before I begin with our discussions for today, I would like to remind you to subscribe if you have not subscribed. This channel is dedicated to the teaching of SHS subjects like history, CRS, government, social studies, English, and we are looking forward to adding more of the subjects. Yes. So today we are looking at the outcome of the 1951 legislative elections. And this was the first ever election conducted in the Gold Coast. The first ever election, I repeat, the first election to be conducted in the Gold Coast was the 1951 legislative election, right? Yes, and so that is what we are going to look at today. We are going to look at the outcome of that election, okay, and the consequences that election had on the political history of the Gold Coast, now Ghana. In our previous lesson, we looked at our previous lesson. We did look at the reasons why Dr. Kwame Nkrumah left the UGCC. You recall that we had already looked at the formation of the UGCC and the aims and then so on and so forth. Then we had also looked at the formation of the CPP, which was later founded by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. So in our very last lesson before this one, we did look at the reasons why Dr. Kwame Nkrumah decided to part ways with the members of the UGCC or with the UGCC party. And I think we saw that. And so in case you have not watched that lesson, I would include a link in the description under this video so that you kindly go in there and watch for us before you can be able to understand some of the issues that we are going to raise over here. All right, good. So let's begin with our lesson objectives for today. So our lesson objectives for today is quite simple. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to mention some of the political parties that contested in the 1951 election. Okay, and so if you are asked to mention some of the political parties that contested in the first ever election held in Ghana or in the Gold Coast, what were the political parties that contested in that election? You should be able to do that for us. And then two, you should be able to analyze the 1951 general election, the legislative election, analyze the results and try and come up with your own explanation as to the outcome, of the results. So basically, these two objectives are what should guide us in our lesson today. So let's look at the general introduction. So we are aware that the general election based on the 1951 Constitution was held on February 8, 1951. So the first election to be held in the Gold Coast, now Ghana, was held on February 8, 1951. Okay, February 8, 1951 was the first day or first time that an election was conducted in the Gold Coast, now Ghana. Now, this election was conducted based on the demands of the 1951 Constitution, known as the Cosi Constitution or the Adin-Clark Constitution. And we have also learned about the Adin-Clark Constitution or the Cosi Constitution. And so if you have not watched that constitution, kindly search on it on the platform or on the channel. It's there. Now, you recall that after the 1948 rout or disturbances, the Watson Commission was set up to look into the causes of the disturbances or the route. And one of the recommendations or the outcomes, I mean, we have also done the causes of the 1948 route, so I presume you know. In case you don't know, please kindly check on the platform. So one of the recommendations of the Watson Commission at that time was that the Watson Commission demanded that a new constitution be drafted for the Gold Coast, because the Watson Commission, according to their report, indicated that the 1946 constitution, the Alambans constitution, according to the Watson Commission, was even outmoded before birth. And so you realize that some of the educated elite were against that particular constitution. And so a new constitution, according to the Watson Commission recommendation, a new constitution should be drawn, and this constitution should meet the aspirations of the Ghanaians. And so that was the reason why the 1951 constitution was drafted for the Gold Coast. Now, interestingly, we also learned that in that constitution, the COSI committee that was set up with the chairmanship of Henry Kosi, we realized that Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was not included in that 39 committee members, and I mean, no reason was given as to why Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, who at this time was very popular among the UGCC, even though the other 5 UGCC members were included in the 39-member committee, we realized that Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was not included in that committee. And so the 1951 Constitution had indicated that an election should be held in the Gold Coast, and that accounted for the first ever election conducted in the Gold Coast in 1951. Good. So with that one, let's look at some of the issues surrounding the election. Now, in that election, the voting age for the election was reduced from 25 to 21. So, and today, you know, the voting age today is 18. But the first election that was ever conducted in the Gold Coast in 1951, the voting age was supposed to be 21. It was reduced from 25 to 21. You also recall that the Gettysburg Constitution made provisions for some limited, voting based on property franchise, and so that accounted for the reason why the voting age was reduced from 25 to 21. And this was a recommendation made by the COSI committee, in 1951. Good. So all 21 years and above were eligible to vote in this election. So let's take a look at the political parties that contested in the 1951 election. So the first of them, of course, you will be able to mention the most popular, the two of these parties, the Convention's People's Party, the CPP, which of course would certainly contest, all right? And then we also had the National Democratic Party, the NDP, and then we also had the United Gold Coast Convention, another popular party, the UGCC, and then we also had the People's Democratic Party, the PDP. All these parties today are not still around. It's only the CPP that is still in the political books of the country. The UGCC today have been transformed to the NPP, but these two, I don't really know. These two people, I don't really know where they can be found today in our politics. Yes, so these four political parties contested the 1951, or the first ever election conducted in the Gold Coast. Among these two, the most famous would be the Convention's People's Party, the CPP, right? The Convention's People's Party, the CPP, and the United Gold Coast Convention. These were the two famous parties, as you can think about, because in all our discussion, these two parties, the first political parties formed in the Gold Coast was the United Gold Coast Convention. And so, and Nkrumah's of course, popularity will also make the CPP very, very popular. And so these four parties contested the election. Let's take a look at the outcome of the election. Like outcome of the election. So in that election, 38 seats were contested in that election. Today we have more than like 200 and something parliamentary seats, being contested. But the first ever election conducted in the Gold Coast, 38 seats were to be contested. That is the Legislative Council. 38 seats were to be contested in that election. And out of that 38 seats, amazingly, the CPP won 34. Interesting. The CPP won 34. The Nkrumah's party won 34 of these seats. Then the UGCC only won 3 out of the 34, and one of the seats went to an independent candidate. Come on. So, analyze this results. What do you think? And, my problem with the current situation with regards to celebrating the Founders' Day on the 4th of August it starts from here. Because the president changing, and I've said this again, the president changing the date from Nkrumah's birthday, 21st September, to the 4th of August, which happens to be the day the UGCC was formed, that is an error. That is what makes people, that is why I will support people who say that the president is only trying to propagate, to make his people prominent in our history books, though they are prominent, but to bring his people out or to eulogize his people. But the president also said that he did that so that everybody will be celebrated, which I agree with him. But the date could have been fixed on any universal date, but to fix it on the UGCC date, the founding day of the UGCC, that would make people come out with issues regarding to the Founders' Day, and people may not even, be interested in celebrating that day because of the day. Now, I know the president wants us to celebrate the UGCC. That is the underlying reason. But look at the first election conducted in the Gold Coast. Only three seats. The party that the president wants us to celebrate won only 3 seats among the majority. Can you just imagine? And the CPP, that today we don't care, won 34 seats. 34 seats. So then why didn't the president change the 21st September to the day that the CPP was formed? You see, or even to a neutral date. So that is where the problem, comes from. And so if we are to celebrate the UGCC, to me, looking at these election results, I don't see the reason why the UGCC should be celebrated when indeed it was the CPP that actually even won the independence for the country, which the UGCC failed. And looking at the election results, 34 seats won by the CPP and only 3 won by the UGCC. I don't think that there is any proper argument other than to fix the date on a neutral day instead of it being on the founding day of the UGCC. So this was the outcome of the 1951 election. So that made the CPP the first political party to win an election in the Gold Coast. So let's look at the events that occurred after the election. Bear in mind that during the election, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was not around. He had been in prison on January 9th, 1950. So he had served almost close to months, in prison at James Fort prison. So on January 9th, 1950, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah declared a positive action. And in this positive action, he meant that the people in the Gold Coast at that time were to embark on strike, a sit-down strike to be precise. And in this strike, nobody would go to work on that day. And this was to force the colonial governor to give or to grant independence to the people. You recall that we have learned that one of the approaches towards achieving independence was a radical way. Nkrumah was more of radical as compared to the UGCC. And we said that some of these radical methods were strikes and co. And so The positive action, which was declared by Nkrumah on 9 January 1950, was meant to force the colonial governor to grant independence for the people of the Gold Coast. And so, he was jailed for that. And so, from that time, January 9th, almost a year. He spent almost a year in James Fort Prison. And that's the image of the James Fort prison. And this is the inside the James Fort prison. So he won the election whilst he was in jail, and apparently it was Komala Gbedema who campaigned for him, because you'll be asking, so how did he campaign? It was Gbedema who campaigned. He used his posters to go around the country campaigning for him, and so he would, of course, Gbedema would go on to become the first finance minister of the country. Yes, and so that was that. And there are so many reasons why Nkrumah will win that election. As Ghanaians as we are very sympathetic. You even recall after the 1948 rout, and the 6 people were in prison, including Nkrumah. They became known as the Big Six. And so for Nkrumah to be in prison whilst an election is taking place because he was championing the cause of the people, definitely that would be a huge factor why people would want to vote for him and see what will happen, or what would the British authorities do, because he is in prison. All right, good. So he was released in prison from the James Fort prison after the election. And then after Nkrumah was released, he was appointed leader of government business. All right, so 1951 he was appointed as leader of government business, because at that time the Gold Coast was not yet a republic, and a new executive council for the first time was made up of all Ghanaian members. So you recall from 1916, the Clifford Constitution, up to 1951. It was the 1951 Constitution that gave the members, that made the members of the Executive Council to be all Ghanaians. All right, and that was the first time. That was the first time in the history of the Gold Coast. And so 6 CPP parliamentarians were part of the Executive Council because they were in the majority now. And then they had 2 members who were also coming from the Asante and the Northern Territory. So these people, made up of 8 Ghanaians, were now in the Executive Council, and 3 British officials from the Legislative Assembly, who of course will represent the important aspect of the economy, the gold, the mining, the banking sector and co, joined them. So for the first time, we had 8 Ghanaian majority on the Executive Council. Good. And so that is how the 1951 election went. Good. And this is how Dr. Kwame Nkrumah became the first leader of government business. In our next lesson, we shall look at the 1954 Constitution, the Kwame Nkrumah Constitution. And that is very interesting because, remember, the 1951 Constitution, Nkrumah was not invited to be part of the committee in drafting that Constitution. And so when he won the election in 1951, he decided to change the 1951 Constitution because he felt that it was a colonial, kind of constitution, and therefore he would make a drastic change in the terms or clauses in the Constitution, and that will even take away the role of the chiefs in politics. Nkrumah will take away all the chiefs that were being put there by the British, and it will be very interesting to watch the first ever constitution to be drafted fully by Ghanaian, and see how the people and the chiefs especially and the educated elite would respond to that constitution. Good. So it's been a good time. We thank you for your time. So of course, wait for the next election, 1954 Dr. Kwame Nkrumah Constitution. Good. So we will meet some other time. Subscribe to the channel.
TV, first of all, equals. Bye.